Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So if you're checking this out when it comes out, you're going to see there was no Sunday live stream tonight, so I was a little bit busy with a little bit of work-related stuff and also some stuff I needed to work on around the house. So we'll be back next week. As far as that's concerned, it'll be Friday, usual time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 Pacific. One other thing I'll throw out there, and this is just at the beginning of the video, and this is kind of a little kind of a survey that I want to get, is that if you do check out the live streams, do you have a preference between the Friday live stream and the Sunday one? I'm happy to do either or both, but it's one of those things where it does take up a lot of time. So, and the Friday one tends to go longer, which is fine by me. I enjoy it. It's a little bit easier to do that. The Sunday one does need to be more of a hard cutoff, but it's one of those things where if it's a little bit, as we get into the summertime and folks are outside, maybe they're not as interested in checking out as many live streams during the weekend, so it might be fine going one or the other. I'm open to it, so I'm going to keep my options open as far as that's concerned. But any feedback you have on that of what your preference is going to kind of help me out a little bit, because I don't mind claiming back a couple of hours, and I also don't mind doing it. But it's just got to be, the interest has to be there for both from the folks watching and then from the folks who are participating. So that's something I'll kind of gauge over the next couple of weeks as we go on. But anyway, for today's video, I want to talk about a couple of things that I did address a little bit on the Friday live stream, but I want to expand upon them a little bit and then also show a couple of more pieces of information. And I'll leave some links for you in the description if you do want to read into some of this stuff yourself. So the first one is, I'm just starting off with the channel here at the beginning. If for whatever reason you're not subscribed to the channel, I would be appreciative if you would do that and like the video. But anyway, so let me quickly go through a couple of items. First one, regarding eBay. One thing that happened recently, and you may or may not be aware of it. If you're not, if you are, then you can skip through this piece. I'll try to put some timestamps on this so you can skip ahead to the topic that interests you. But one thing that folks that have been around eBay a little while know about is that eBay has its own market research product called Terapeak, and it's something that they've actually charged for. I have paid for it in the past and I've used it. It's okay, but it's basically like an expanded version, a slightly better version of the completed auction search. But Terapeak would have the ability to search going back 365 days, which is really useful if you want to get like a little bit of a better sense of what's been out there, at least over the last calendar year. But recently they decided to start making it available for free. So if you go to ebay.com and you go under the selling tab, if you go to the right and go to the selling section and you end up here, you can click on what's called research. So you go to this thing here. So you can do Terapeak product research. So I'm not paying for this. This right here is now available to me, and I can go obviously 365 days. So I already did a search just as an example. And this one's nice because I can show you. So you've got active, and you can also search for sold. So you can see obviously the time period is included there, the average sold price. It gives you some basic data. It's useful to have, and you can check out sales trends and all that good stuff. So it's kind of fun to have. Obviously, not every shield is the same, but it is nice to be able to see some of this stuff. So let me close that for the moment. So this one, and remember, when you're using these searches, it falls under the same category as when you're doing a regular search. It's hardly perfect because you can see right here, this right here, it talks about being a shield. This is Leaf Invictus. This isn't a shield card. When I'm talking about shield, I'm actually referring to something like this. And the advantage that I have with using this search is that I have been observing these for a while. So a lot of these either I bid on, I won, or I am fully aware of because I was tracking it and monitoring it. So this is the 2002-2003 Upper Deck Premier Collection Medano Shield. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make a play on it. It sold for $1,000 fixed price, which is exactly what happened. But you can see Nathan McKinnon ended up here, even though I put Medano explicitly. But anyway, and this was a lot that included a shield and also had Medano in it. So the limitations that you have with the regular search are going to be there in Terapeak. Again, if you're familiar with Terapeak already, you already know this. I'm just giving it for anybody who's less familiar. But it is still a useful tool, and that does give you some data. And what's nice about it is that if there was a best offer, it allows you to see what the actual best offer was. So let me quickly show you this. So this one here was an auction that I bid on, and I was the underbidder on this. So it went for $910, and I was actually underbidder on that for, I believe it was $870. And that goes back to last August. So that is accurate. I was a bidder on that and I didn't win, but that is what the final auction price was. And this one here, I also didn't win it, but it was originally sold for a fixed price of $700. Now this one is a bit mysterious because I don't know what happened, but the same item came up for sale later on and I was the winner at this. So this is exactly what I offered for it, and that's exactly what I paid for it. So that is accurate. So this gives you some information. Obviously there's a lot of the market movers tool and the card ladder tool, which I've mentioned in the past I do use. And it's useful to me in certain ways. Terapeak is actually very good as far as eBay and giving you that information, but it is a little bit limited. It's very basic as far as what it can do. But in a pinch, if it's free, like what appears to be the case now from eBay for sellers apparently, And I only sell cards every now and then, so I'm not like a power seller or anything. This is just available now to me now, where before I had to pay for this. So it's nice to have it as a backup. And if you're somebody who doesn't want to pay for Market Movers or Card Ladder, even though it's not as robust as some of those other ones and doesn't offer all the features, well, free is pretty good. So being able to search completed auctions for the last 365 days will give you a chance to maybe search for some information and be able to develop some comps that can help you to try to decide what you're going to bid on or what you are willing to pay for certain cards. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention if you weren't already aware of it. So Terapeak, for whatever reason, apparently now through eBay, for sellers, you'll have to look into it yourself. But apparently on ebay.com, you can get Terapeak for free, which if you are looking for something like this and you don't want to shell out extra money, it's not a terrible thing. It's like the completed value search, except for 365 days it can go up to. So it is a little bit more useful in that regard. So let's move on to the second thing now. Second thing, PWCC Premier Auction. And I talked about this a little bit during the live stream. The important thing is this. I'll quickly scan through this a little bit more than I did when I was talking to Bobby on the live stream. So specifically what they're looking for, and this is why I said it was kind of interesting, because it basically feels like a competitive retort to kind of what Golden Auctions was doing, because stop me if this sounds familiar. So it's going to be launching on March the 10th, and this one is high end specifically. So the estimated market value of the items is going to be over 50,000. So it's going to be really high end stuff. But the key here is that they're doing it on their own website, similar to what Golden does, and approved bidders only. So there is a bidder vetting program, exactly like what Golden does. So again, it should sound familiar because it does. So it's hosted exclusively on the website. The items must have an estimated value of at least 50,000. It is a 10-day auction with extended bidding, which again follows the kind of traditional auction model. So this isn't an eBay thing. This is a PWCC on their own dedicated platform with extended bidding offered. So this is for high-end stuff right now, but it is going to be interesting to see the success or failure of this particular auction. May be a precursor to additional items being included and maybe the threshold dropping down as you go. And that could create a viable competitor for Golden Auctions, which for the market, honestly, is a good thing. The more competitors who are in that space, it will encourage innovation. It will get them to actually trying to, do better by the bidders and the sellers. And it means that there may be some more competitiveness as far as fees are concerned. So it's just something to keep an eye on. It's not, you may not be in the market. I'm not for $50,000 cards, but at the very least, their success or failure may in turn lead to a little more competition, which may down the road be useful for things more in kind of our normal kind of price range. So you can see from what I've shown here on the screen, it gives you a little information about how the extended bidding works. So if anybody bids after the extended bidding period has started, bids are extended for 15 minutes. Each time a new bid is placed, a 15-minute timer gets reset. That's what extended bidding is. So extended bidding can go for quite some time, and it really does allow the determination of if you are the winner at the end of extended bidding, you really wanted the thing, because you had to bid ahead prior to the extended bidding time starting in order to even be eligible. And then you have to kind of hang in there and be the high bidder at the end of it when the dust settles. And you do have to go through an approval process to be a bidder. And it takes a couple of days to be part of it because there's a little bit of back and forth. You basically have to prove you have enough money to pay for it. If you're doing $50,000 cards, you're probably going to have to show some bank statements or something to indicate, your credit worthiness or that you have the finances to actually be able to make the payment. That's what the whole vetting process requires. So it's just something important to keep in mind. And I suspect a lot of stuff from the vault will be things like that, where they're already going to have it in-house. And again, in the same vein, having it in-house means they can ship it out, which again is very similar to the Golden model where they get the stuff first, and then that's how it ends up working. So these are the seller fees right here. Gives you a little bit of information about that. It's going to be interesting to see. I'd be very curious to see what that ends up looking like. But just something to keep in mind. PWCC Premier Auction, kind of a viable competitor to Golden, something they're trying to do that has a lot of the same features and characteristics. So just bear that in mind. So that's the PWCC Premier Auction. Now, for the last item, let me refer you to a podcast. So this right here is a podcast called Grails. It's by Alton Insights. I wasn't too familiar with it prior, but I did hear about it, and specifically this episode, the most recent one. It's about 34 minutes, and it's Nat Turner and Kevin Lillane talking about PSA's acquisition of Genamint. So specifically, I'm going to talk about the Genamint thing here for a couple of minutes. So this one here is a good primer because it's Nat Turner himself explaining, along with Kevin Lillane, explaining a little bit about their vision and a little bit about their roadmap as far as Genamint and kind of what they have in mind. Long story short, Genamint is a software application that allows the scanning and creating what they call the fingerprint of certain cards. There's a couple of potential useful pieces of this that could be helpful for PSA in terms of trying to help them be a little bit more efficient, potentially be able to catch, crackouts and resubmissions where maybe something's been altered. That's useful. And then in addition to that, you're also going to have a lot of possibilities for enhancing some of the grading things and possibly getting some more efficiencies. But I do want to be clear about this. I don't think it's going to fix anything overnight, but I do like that on this podcast, Nat Turner does outline that, and Kevin Lenane as well outlines that there's certain wins that they can have in the short term, but then there's some things they're hoping to have as the product gets better and expands in the longer term, which are going to do some of these other things. So it's not going to be an overnight, just snap your fingers fix. But it is something that potentially could help down the road, especially with keeping track of information. And it also encourages them to scan and build up a database of different cards, which down the road could be a very useful tool as far as diagnostics and catching different alterations and things. So just something to bear in mind. Like I said, it's 34 minutes. If you want to check it out, this is the podcast. And then I'll finish with an article talking about the Genamint thing as well. And I will try, there is a demo for Genamint that is on YouTube. I'll try to grab the link for you, and I'll throw the link in the description. So I'll throw the link to a bunch of these articles here. So this article, the podcast, and that, I will throw the link to that in the description for you if you want to check it out, and then you can see for yourself a little bit more. So Darren Ravel here talked about a couple of things. So it's just kind of outlining some of the information, talking about giving a little more information about the specific acquisition and giving a little background as well. And it also includes some numbers. So one of the key takeaways, and I'll leave it to you, like I said, I'll include this article here talking about this, but one key takeaway that I did get from this, actually there's a couple, but one of them is that Nat Turner outlined that they're not looking at doing like a PSA black label version at the moment. Again, take everything with a grain of salt because everything is subject to change, but at the same time, that's something notable. Another notable thing is that Nat Turner has expressed in this podcast that he's looking at bringing back those lower tier grading levels, including, he ideally would like to have a $20 grading level. Now, it's going to be interesting to see because part of the huge backlog is having those bulk submission tiers. So we'll see what that ends up looking like as far as how successfully they'll be able to bring that back. I think a lot of it is going to be connected to if they can find enough people to be able to do the grading, and these small efficiencies, maybe this software can help, and any other efficiencies they have as far as getting stuff shipped out, processed quicker, getting it in the slab a little bit quicker, anything that helps reduce the time between when they receive your item and when they ship it back to you is going to be a huge help. But the more cards basically they can get out the door, the better their capacity, the better likelihood is they'll be able to do it. I'm still kind of surprised that they would shoot to have that $20 service level myself, but from the PSA set registry standpoint, it does make sense. So just a couple of different thoughts that I have about it, and I'm going to keep kind of formulating them as we go along, and I'm going to keep listening for stuff like this that'll give us some insight as we go along, because I already talked earlier this week about CSG having to increase its prices to reflect market demand, and the demand is as high as it's ever been. And that's going to be an ongoing problem for a lot of these, especially if with the lower price tiers. So we'll have to see what a lot of these third-party graders do as far as trying to balance with wanting to have an available option, but at the same time not wanting to get bombarded to the point that it basically stalls all the works and prevents everybody else from being able to get their stuff. So just a couple of things to think about and some things to consider and to keep an eye on going forward as we go into the summertime here in the hobby. We're still in this kind of a nebulous position where we're going to have to see. We are not quite as hot as we were, but it's definitely not cooled off quite a bit. So there's a lot of back and forth with this, and and everybody is kind of trying to maneuver themselves and position themselves for what's going to be coming going forward. We don't know the status of the national. We don't know what the rest of the year will look like. There's a lot of what ifs out there that are going to affect what's going to happen with a lot of this stuff. But there are still some moving pieces in the hobby, and it's definitely worth keeping an eye out on. Even as a collector, though, you're going to want to keep an eye on some of this stuff because it is going to help you inform what you're going to do strategically in order to keep, building your collection or just, sitting back maybe and waiting or whatever the situation is going to be depending on what your case is and your budget. So just like I said, keep one eye out to it because it is still good to know some of this hobby news, and we'll be keeping an eye out on it and talking about it as we go forward. Anyway, so that's it for me for now. If you got any questions or comments, feel free to throw them in the comments section, and I'd be happy to reply back to them as soon as I can. Otherwise, thanks very much. We'll be back on the live stream, like I said, next Friday, and then we'll figure out what the schedule looks like going forward for May and onward. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.